All right, so this is uh Oscar here in VR. Um, for those who aren't aware, is this was a rather large animatronic ogre that used to be in a local variety store. Variety store being kind of like if you could combine a Walmart and a Hobby Lobby. Back then, things like that existed, and every year for Halloween they would have different animatronic displays. This one in particular, and a couple of their displays were from a company in Germany called High Motion. The thing was, is there were only a couple of these. Really, there was this style. There were smaller versions of him, and then there were one that was actually even bigger than this. Which supposedly he was about 14 feet, and I'm assuming that does include his pedestal. Um, So what happened was is they filed for bankruptcy. They sold everything, and by 1993, he was bought by a local that would try to set him up for Halloween, but it was just too large and cumbersome because he almost weighed a full ton, like something like anywhere from 1,400 to 1,600 pounds or something. But so long story short, for about 30 years, people have wondered about this. And so I set off, I had this idea years ago that if I were to, at the very least, if I don't have that much clay available, I could at least digitally reproduce him and resculpt him. Um, for whatever reason, once you're making these files, is they don't degrade like foam latex or anything. So it's available, to be able to do either virtual reality, um, make a potential future mold of the full scale thing. But anyway, so that's for people who don't know. If you do know, I will say this: is this video, being that I'm taking it while I'm in VR, really won't do it justice to see this in 3D. Because the 2D version is going to change the focal length. It's going to put kind of a fisheye on it, kind of like a selfie camera, or inner camera of your cell phone. And so what I have here, I'm inside. This is actually Horizon Worlds. So if you do have a Quest, you can come and see him under construction so far. The head sculpt is about 90% or so. I mean, I'm sure there's always things I can find to refine, but it was an arduous month-long process, looking at old photos, then using like my lens of camera or my knowledge of lenses to look at these photos and determine the focal length, so I can get an idea of like depths and proportions, because obviously all of the photos are a little different. Typically, you have some longer lenses if it's a far shot like this, which is going to be, closer to reality, like a good portrait lens, like an 80 millimeter plus. However, a lot of the close-ups, like if you're getting up like this, are gonna be, 28 millimeters, 16, etc. And the video you're seeing now is probably even less than that, so it's kind of skewed from how he actually looks in VR. So what I have here, he is to scale, just about. Luckily, I had a photo of one of his owners, and I was able to use the proportion of his head to about the nose. And if you look at the nose, the middle is about the size of a cranium. So that worked out. And height wise, I had a couple people in here, and we were assuming, okay, let's say these avatars are about 5'10". So he is right about within inches of how he actually was. And then I just have, some block out going on of his arms and shoulders just to get an idea of how it's going to shape out. If it's not obvious to you, a block out is when you're taking basic shapes and forms in 3D modeling, sculpting. I think in sculpting, they might call it a block in, but we call it block out. So you're just kind of blocking out the rough shapes. And obviously the head is missing. He does. I do have to sculpt a tongue pad of some kind. But he is also without hair. He also is missing a beard and so on. Um, but yeah, coming in here, seeing him realized like this is it triggered nostalgia in me from over 30 years now. And it kind of gave me this new feeling of Halloween because this guy was a literal centerpiece for Halloween at this store. But anyway, so I'm still working on the limitations within Horizon Worlds. I have been having issues with attaching my materials from Painter to the FBXs, so I have to figure out why. I've been able to do relatively high poly sculpts in here. As far as polygonal and point limits, as you maybe, I think in this other sculpt test I did, as that was 100,000 polygon head or bust, and I think I hit a limit at 600,000. So you can't even do a million polygons in a world, unfortunately, and you also can't import your own animations. So what I intend to do is run all of these assets when I'm done, run them into VR chat through Unity, and I will, when I'm done with the full body, is I'll probably rig him and get an animation going so that at the very least, if you have VR, you'll be able to experience how he was 30 years ago, through the magic of digital technology, and hopefully get the animations on point. Um, I won't be able to do that here, so he'll be static, but I do plan to also do a bunch of the architecture of Switz's. So I'll have the clock tower, a good chunk of the exterior. I think I'm going to work either today or tomorrow on starting to model the ceiling because that's simple enough where it had rafters. And Oscar was so big that his head almost went in between. If you can picture the rafters of like a gymnasium, because I'm pretty sure one of his functions, like I don't have a blueprint of the animatronic, like, oh, how many degrees of freedom, what kind of mechanisms, but if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure his head kind of could go up and down. Um, we know it went side to side. We know he had eyelids. His mouth obviously went up and down. Um, I don't think I'm gonna. I might do eyelids if I do the full animation, but that will remain to be seen. But yeah, I do intend on starting with some of the architecture so he can be housed. If anyone remembers, he would come in about here, and he was about this distance. Well, you would come in. There was a vestibule. There were a couple different entrances, but one of them I do remember was kind of like here, and it had one of those like little kid ride along helicopters, and you come in, the registers would be here. And I remember first seeing this thing, and keep in mind at the distance, the height you're seeing him here is let's call this avatar 5'10", 6 foot, average height. Is imagine being 4 or 5 years old or something at 3 feet tall. How intimidating this was, because I'm telling you, even in VR right now, it's pretty intimidating at that size. Like it's definitely large. So I can imagine seeing the real thing now as an adult would be pretty creepy. Other than that, I will probably try to do the graveyard scene. I kind of put this plane here just to roughly mark it out, but with the fence, maybe if I get ambitious, do the whole animatronic band, the skeletons. So we'll see where it goes, but maybe before this is done, Horizons will have some upgrades. But I think I'll intend to see what the limitations are over in VR chat. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to animate over there. So anyway, if you do have a Quest and you grew up with this thing and you really want a heavy dose of nostalgia, despite him being unfinished, but it is still cool to see him, in a construction phase. Just go on your Horizon Worlds and search Switz's Oscar test. So SWITZ, and you'll be able to kind of experience this. You can get Horizon on mobile, but obviously it's gonna look very fishy as far as fisheye goes. So uh, if you're a Switzes fan, it's almost this is gonna be worth it to just find a Quest on eBay, even, and I'm telling you, you will not regret seeing this guy like this so far. So wait till he's fully textured and his body is in there and whatnot. So alrighty.